are these people?
Who are these people? Hi, everybody. It's Indy. This is INN One-on-One, and I'm really excited today. I've only gotten really to talk with a couple of the Indie Media Award honorees that over the last couple of years have really shown to be some of the best of the best in independent media in exposing truth, in trying to be as honest as possible in sharing what they know and what they see, and making corrections if they find something that challenges what they've been seeing, and certainly questioning everything they see around them. This person has done a lot of the things that it's kind of like I want to be when I grow up. So I want to formally do a decent introduction. So this guy is the host of his own show called The Last American Vagabond, but it's not just a show, it's a network. It's more than that. It's a website where he publishes, and he has other people publish articles. They do kind of documentary type of films, but most importantly, they do in-depth 4+ hour live streams on a multi-days per week basis. So welcome to the show, Ryan Cristián, The Last American Vagabond. Man.
My pleasure, brother.
Dude.
To be on. And I was just looking at the award again the other day. I noticed it got caught in the documentary, and I was glad to see that, because that was one of the early things I got a long time ago, and I was very proud of that.
Yeah, man. Well, it's funny when I had first talked to Misty Winston about initially coming up with this idea, I'm like, there really is not. There was that Serena Shim Award that people still give out. I still see that occasionally, and it got some controversy, but that's a phenomenal honor, and it's got a nice list of people. And I'm like, other than that, like, that's basically been it in our space for a long time. So why don't we kind of create something? I spend hours a week vetting independent media, and then we'll open it up to INN members and Misty, and we'll kind of try to showcase the people that we think are doing the right thing. So we had, again, this is the third year already. I'm trying to decide who would be in for 2025 already. I can't believe we're working on our fourth year for that. But the reason why you were one of the honorees, and you were in that initial class where we're like, we've got to identify kind of who are the first ballot Hall of Famer type of people and get them out there first. And
thank you.
Seriously, it's just been a tough 5 years, and it's interesting that you in the last year have collaborated with a lot of those other people to come up with a network of your own. Now, TLAV alone was its own network, right? From what it seemed like, you were doing interview streams with people, but you were showcasing other independents on your platform, and that was kind of the dream and the vision behind why we created INN in the first place. You were just doing it kind of more established, I feel like, and now you got the Independent Media Alliance. So, wow, when that was announced, I got really excited, because that to me is like a culmination and a very similar path to where we were, where you're going to have a shared collaborative space, right, with Whitney and with Derek and with, I think, 17 other people. I mean, it's pretty wild. Round tables. There's going to be the, well, I'll let you talk about it. So kind of explain how that happened, how that all came together, what the reasoning behind it was. I'd love to hear more about, like, kind of the formation of the Independent Media Alliance. I saw the press releases and everything, but I'd love to hear, like, kind of your behind the scenes explanation of what happened.
Yeah, definitely. At first, just on Last American Vagabond, it started as just a certain little project long before I ever thought it would become what it is today. And jumping forward, a decade or so, a long period of time, I ended up bringing on people to write and do other other aspects of, research and so on. And that ended up being Whitney Webb and Derrick Broze and Robert Inlakesh and Matt Arrett and Taylor Hudak and a couple of others that kind of came and went. But, that was not so much a network as people that just were part of the Last American Vagabond and still are. Right now we're going through a lull essentially through, I mean, I think we've talked about off air at least more than once, and maybe on a wake up about the different lawsuits we've gone through and the amount of attacks we've had and the amount of money we had to pay to arguably win those things. I mean, it's not really arguably, just I feel like I lost because we spent so much money. But the point is that because of all that, we've had a lull in the writing and stuff, but they're all still very much a part of the team of the Last American Vagabond, not necessarily just posting on the site, and then we, after that, that's been growing in its own right for a long time. And on that same note, by the way, it was very important to me as the editor and founder of Last American Vagabond to bring people on, paid writing and so on, and making sure that I did not make them choose between what they had been building their whole lives and starting to work with TLAV. Very important to me, because I've seen that in this field for such a long time that it's like very, guarded, and which we understand why. But I wanted to make sure that Derrick could continue to, which the conscious resistance is fantastic, and it's been there for a very long time, and make sure that can continue to grow, or help, be there and help Whitney be able to build Unlimited Hangout, because that started after we were working with TLAV. And so that's what I thought was so important about what we were doing, is that it was about not just making TLAV a focal point, it was about helping grow out more of everybody's beneficial work, And then the IMA came around. It was just before the last selection process. And Whitney had reached out to me and pointed out something we've talked about many times now, but we saw this weird reaction. Now, a little bit of a preface, actually. That a lot of us, and I take this from James Corbett, that's where he's one of the people I look up to in this field, always have. He's outstanding, one of the best, if not the best. And he was really adamant about, where this is why I first caught on to the idea of like your vote doesn't really translate. Not that it doesn't matter in representative government, but we've been stolen from us, right? And he would say things like vote no one, 2024, right? No, vote no one. And people would react to that, like almost confused, but really rarely got any attention. People would disregard it like you were the child in the room, right? They didn't get what you were going at. Or, we start talking about alternative paths or Derrick's exit and build and these different points, right? And so I've been doing that ever since I've been doing this work, because I really don't believe in the process, in the system that's in front of us. Not necessarily that voting, if forced to be in a state of society, not that that's not important, because it is if you're forced to be in a state of society. But so as we went forward, right before the 2024, right before the last election, we started doing the same thing we always do. Vote no one, you're being played left versus right, saying, two wings of the same bird. And it got the most incredible pushback from people that large people in mainstream alternative media, like Jones people, Benny Johnson's, or people it became the focal point of this conversation that we were black-pilled, right? There's a purity test that nobody could uphold. And what's crazy about it is we've always been talking about that, and we've always juxtaposed it next to solutions, right? Here's what else you can do. Here's what, why we think voting is one of the least important things you can do to make a difference in this conversation. And yet the argument was somehow that we were presenting an impossible choice. We're trying to trick people from, not choosing Trump was the ultimate point, because they rationalized that he was somehow the lesser of evils. That's a lot to get into. There's other points I could make there, but that was the kind of the impetus. And we realized something was building. Something was different, right? Clearly, they were vulnerable to this in our eyes. They recognized that this was something they had to defend against, even though before it was basically ignored. And so we got together and discussed between the three of us, Derrick, Whitney, and I, about starting a collaboration, not with any funding mechanisms, not that we had to do anything other than just a collection, a loose gathering of people who all had the same. And I think the main principle started with the two-party illusion, being able to call out the obvious genocide that was taking place, these objective facts that we can clearly see in the world, and people that are non-partisan. Those are the three main things. And basically looked for people that we thought met that at a very high level. And we still plan to build it out. We're waiting on a few things. We can talk about that next in regard to Odyssey, but immediately found people that were really, on that same path. And so we started that group. And we called it the Independent Media Alliance. And it's really what it was, just an alliance. Nobody was forced to do anything. We didn't, collaborate on anything else we wanted to, and that's where we still are right now, where we do panels and roundtables and talk about what's going on. And it just got the most incredible attack as well, about people trying to claim one thing or the other. And what's funny is, going forward since then, we've seen an endless string of what purity tests actually look like, or what black-pilled actually looks like. And as everything we said about what we worried about would happen if you chose to continue this left-right paradigm lie is literally taking place right now. And none of us are happy about that. The last thing we wanted was for all these problems to continue. And now most of the people that were attacking us for that are the ones that are standing up and going, here's a problem. This is why we need, kind of repositioning themselves to be the next rebel for whatever comes next. And it's a really important time for independent media. And there's a lot more ways we can go in it, but I think that's a good kind of, general premise for how it started.
Yeah. And then again, the caliber of people that you were able to pull from when it came to the Independent Media Alliance, all right, where you've got Charlie Robinson and you've got James Corbett as part of this, and you've got Truth Stream Media, and I adore Melissa and Aaron's videos. Steve's been showing them more at AM Wake Up. Phenomenal. I mean, just incredible people who have done a extensive body of work that have a perspective that for some reason does not get showcased at all really in mainstream, and because it is showing, it leads to a path that exposes who's actually running everything, which is, I guess, what they of course don't want everyone to see.
Corbett as well. I always make, it always blows me away how James Corbett can be so foundational in so many things we're talking about, and people can almost reference his work or even do reference his work without actually identifying the Corbett Report or James. Everyone in this field and mainstream alternative media, everyone knows who he is, and yet he gets he gets referenced less than like, it's wild to me. And I think it really does show you the point you're making there, that it's, for me, it's always been about people who are objective and nonpartisan. And it's just like this anomaly for the system. They just have, the best they can do is just pretend like it's not there. And I think that was kind of what we saw with that.
It's facts versus emotion. And James is incredibly fact-based and he tries to remove the emotion, I think, from the equation intentionally, because he wants you to focus on the data, the information, and what he's presenting, and remove your personal biases, which I think is super important. I think you do a really good job at that too. Now, what I also wanted to point out is I love that you do that on your show, and then you get to AM Wake Up and you're dropping F-bombs and you're just yourself incorporating everything that you've learned in your shows and hanging out with your buddy and sharing the knowledge as to what does this all fucking mean? All right. Because I see you do both, and you're one of the better people at figuring out how to balance that. And I wanted to add, like, how do you do that? How are you able to sit there and be analytical and, not nearly as emotional, I would say, on your own show? I mean, you're passionate, sure, but it's mostly about the facts and the stories and what you're bringing in. Kind of, dude, your documents every show are like, wow, how do you do it? How do you do it all? How do you do it? I don't know how you do it.
The first part about, thank you. To the first part about, emotionally, I've always felt that I've had sort of a, in a way, like, made for this, like, where I think I've seen a lot of people that I've come across who have worked beside me over the years, who have all the best intentions, are absolutely gung-ho about it, throw themselves into this, and then burn out after 6 months. Because it's really, I mean, this stuff is insane. The horrible things we have to look at every day, the just like, the kind of stuff that makes your blood boil, watching the worst people in the world, who everyone knows are the worst people, act like they're saving lives, or, it's that is all sorts of different things that really get to you. And the part that for that, one of the people I'm thinking of right now, it was largely around, like, sex trafficking and stuff that's really dark and hard to, my point is that I feel these things more than I think most people. There's a very, which is hard to not include that when you're, and I still have my emotional moments as well, but at the same time, I have a special ability, I feel, to, like, be able to shut it down after I'm done. Now, lately, to be honest, over the last, let's say, year, I feel like that's getting less and less. It's sometimes weighs with me beyond the show, but I just feel like I'm able to kind of, compartmentalize that. And that's a really important, skill or trait in this, because it allows you to not stew in these things forever, like, be able to break off and enjoy your day and go outside and go for a hike and not be, like, overwhelmed with all these horrible things. And I think that's something that I just nod to all the time. Like, that's just, I think I'm meant to do this, And I do think that it's also just about steeling yourself to it and trying to remember what matters and not just lose yourself in the endless pit. We're all screwed anyway. Like, that's what black pilled actually is. That just giving up and acting like, well, they're all bad, so I might as well choose the one that's less bad. That's black pilled, right? The reality of trying to find solutions in a bad situation is the opposite, But I think that there's a lot of other things you could argue, but I just think it's about, my determination, my willingness, because of a lot of different things that happened to me in my life and different choices I've made, to put myself on the line for people that don't have a voice, right? To stand up for people that need to be helped, because nobody seems to care if you're not out there waving your hands and saying these people are suffering. And then what was the other part you asked? How I do the source material in the show? Is that what you asked?
Right. Yeah. Like, how do you, like, I see the list of links and source references, and first of all, you go for 4 hours at a shot. I mean, I'm exhausted after 2 hours when I do 4 or 5 stories with 4 or 5 other kind of links and mini stories. Hey, go check this out, go look at this, and I'm freaking spent. So I see you going even super in depth. You take that story, like Conyers, Georgia, for example. I mean, you went super deep on that story. You were able to get the testimony from the guy. You had local news reports. And you have to spend all the time just to research that one story. And you've got like 5 or 6 or 7 or 10 of them that you're bringing for your live stream. So it's like, do you have help doing this kind of research? Or people feeding you stuff all day to kind of find these nuggets? Okay, well, that's good.
Well, no, but here it's mixed. Well, here's the thing. There is a clear network of people out there that just are part, in the audience, people or people like that are mods, or people that will text people. There's a few of them out there that I text with that send me things that are important. I take that from James Corbett as well. Same thing he does. It's open source investigation, right? Anybody out there that want to chime in, discuss, debate, and they send you things they want you to look at. And I mean, half of it I get in a given moment is either not relevant to what I want to look that day, or maybe just not relevant at all. And, but I don't care. I want people to overwhelm me with, like, send me what you think is important, And so there's a lot of that. But when it comes to just the show and the daily work, it's just, I just made this point yesterday. There's only one person in here. There's only one person in this team outside of the other writers who do their work, or the people I just mentioned in the community. But whether it's the soundboard or my computer or there's one person, And what's funny is, for the length of work, the time, the deep research, there's only a few other people out there with shows that are similar like that but they have like a 5-person team. They have somebody back there who's running the cameras and who's running and I just think it's worth noting that this is a one-man show. This is the single, and I think that's, I pat myself on the back, I guess. I mean, demonstrating our value, I would say. But, it's a combination of that and being really nothing else going on. I really have just poured my life into this, and as in spending all day researching and organizing. And then what I'll add is that it's not always the one day, right? Like right now, I've got multiple things open, files, not all open windows, but, files that I've been collecting things and organizing. And like, if let's say I had organized a part of the show I didn't use that day, I'll break it down and put it in a little file, like this topic. And, and so I have a lot of building stuff. And so at any moment I go through and I'm looking at the new day of information, right? And I'll hear something that's happening. I go, oh, okay, that brings me to mind to this thing. And I open that up and and so, there'll be like a half or 75% completed sort of investigatory thing going on that I pull in because it's relevant. And, but it's still all continual nonstop work, and that's really what it comes down to. And like Georgia, for example, it was about the fact that is already important to me, because I was already discussing things like Palestine, East Palestine, and, these different other conversations. And well before that too, dioxins and glyphosate and all PFAS and all these different things that nobody really seems to know about, despite how shockingly obvious it is.
Pennsylvania water.
And so
the Pennsylvania water, the gas in the water that people have been finding for more than a decade and nobody wants to talk about. It's like, we drink this stuff. Like, this is as important as it gets. When the Trumpers, for example, will deny that he wants to abolish the EPA and that's a problem, we need to fix the EPA. We need to not allow the corporations to manage the regulation of themselves. And that's what's happened, not just in the EPA, but big pharma and elsewhere. And again, I nonpartisan, people who call that out from both sides. And that's where I think, you mentioned the Independent Media Alliance. They're nonpartisan. They call it out on both sides. And it's so important to do that. But what you said is, so many people fell into you must be a supporter of X if you are criticizing Y. And no, They all fucking suck, because they're all part of the uniparty corporate structure, again, which came out of Whitney, TLAV, all of that vernacular, all of that narrative. It feels like, at least to me, that's where I first heard it and started clicking to me, where I first heard about Event 201 and about looking into things a little bit deeper than they were presented on the surface, because nothing is as it's presented, as we've learned in the last 5 years, especially in corporate media. So how do
it really is.
God, man, it's crazy. And not only that, the gaslighting that they do. You talked about the sex trafficking guys, where the worst people in the world are gaslighting you to act like they're doing something benevolent on behalf of the people or on behalf of society, when things could not further be from the truth. They're benefiting their donors and they're completely screwing over society. And yet there's an entire ecosystem designed to sniff those farts and say, yes, they smell delicious, sir. And here we are standing on the side. I read some really interesting article that talked about, I feel like the person who's watching a play, the Democrats are trying to watch this play and believe that all the actors are real. And I'm standing there going, this is all fucking bullshit. This is all a play. This is all scripted. And they're all like, shh, hey, man, we just want to enjoy our play. Shut the hell up, man. And that kind of described 2024 to me.
Yeah, it comes down, to my mind, to the idea that they have been convinced, and we're seeing it in spades right now. And it's not new right now, but we're seeing it very clearly in the Trump administration with certain people we could easily get into that will just like say one thing, and then all of a sudden Elon's the bad guy, and now they just go, this is the thing now, and I never thought the other thing, even though they just said it 3 days ago. It's like there's people out there that will blindly go along with whatever the team says they're supposed to go along with. And so, like, your point about the play is, I think so many of them, it's not like they openly, in many cases, admit to themselves this is not true, but they just don't even choose to look into it, because that's that's going to help the other side. Why would I even investigate? Because they're the pedophiles, they're the deep state. It's like whatever these hyperbolic terms are about an entire group of half the country. It just becomes about pitting us against ourselves with team sport politics, is what the best way to describe it. It's not about facts. It's not about even really policy. It's about anything that makes my team win over yours. And that's just childish. I mean, that is like that's the lowest common denominator. And I think that's what is really happening. And I think the biggest point that I keep seeing in all that is that I'm of the mind right now that it's always been artificial to some degree, right? Whether it's bots or algorithms, whatever else, or just people that are out there being paid to say things. But I think we're getting to a point to where it's becoming strikingly, like, very, very clear that the entire kind of like leading voice is artificial. That most people right now are aware that there's a genocide being committed, are aware that the U.S. is involved in that, are aware, I can go off on 75 different topics that the, MAGA or the left are trying to argue from a partisan angle is one way or the other, when most people are right now going, I'm not buying it anymore. Now, I've been saying something similar for a lot of things, during COVID-19. I said the same point, and I think that's been proven to be correct. It wasn't partisan. It was, they're always going to have a slant in one way or another, but it was very clear, and still is, that it was very quickly becoming aware to anybody who looked at information and cared about it that this was wrong. And I think they tried to make it partisan, or Israel for that matter. We saw Alan Greenblatt from the ADL get a leaked audio that came out and said, it's not left and right anymore. It's about generational. The kids aren't buying anymore. That's why they went after TikTok. And, they're losing control of the narrative. One good example is what is it? Glastonbury,
the festival this weekend. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, and before with Bob Dylan and so on, there was a person before that with, I think it was Kneecap was one of the bands they were going after, because they are calling out Israel. And so what happened is, we've all seen it. They shut down the stream, and in some places they said they should have, and it's all about censorship because of words, right? But a woman who was in the crowd streamed it with her phone. No real following, not some big influencer, got 1.7 million people tuned in. It's been covered by many people. Apparently, BBC's last major thing they did got like 1.4. And so somebody made this point and said, guys, they don't control the narrative anymore. Like, they're so desperate to push it over the top that it's like the Streisand effect, that people just are like, want to see what's behind that curtain you're hiding, And so the fact that people immediately watched on her phone, and that, and yet they're trying to push the narrative that we're all on the same page, that was racist and we shouldn't allow it on all the channels. Nobody buys it. We're at a very dangerous, but I think hopeful time, as hard as that is to see, because the reason it's getting so crazy is because they're losing control, and that could cause really dangerous things, but we got to power through this. right? We got to maintain our principles and we got to push forward for what's right. And they're going to make it hard for us, but we got to keep fighting for what we know is right, what we believe in.
You know, you mentioned the Glastonbury thing. David Miller actually published, he spent days exposing, there was an email that went out before the festival happened where a bunch of industry executives and influencers signed off on a letter that went to the organizers of the festival demanding that kneecap be removed. And David got a copy of this email and decided to go through the signatories one by one and publish an entire tweet thread exposing it. I did it on my show. Amazing, some of the people. And it was, again, record industry execs, radio control people, again, a lot of agents. And you saw that, what's his name? Bob Villan's agent, UTA, drops him the next day after the thing. Well, he's going to be just fine.
The U.S. government pulled his visa.
That's
like
amazing.
Like,
oh my God.
You have stop anti-Semitism. And I can't say this is what triggered it, but my point is that you have these, Israeli funded entities that are on there. The same thing we saw with Batar USA and Khalil getting deported. They simply go, they tag Bondi, they tag Trump, and they say, get this guy out of here. And within a week, Khalil was removed. Right? This guy, same thing. These people are going, basically calling out, this guy just said this online. And the reason I mentioned, or on the stage, reason I mentioned Stop Anti-Semitism, they're one of these really powerful and influential accounts about just, censoring American speech or anywhere. Yeah. And they said, this is a problem. We can't allow this. Where are you guys at? Randy Fine commented on it. Within, I think, 24 hours, his visa was pulled. No process, nothing. Just yanked his visa because he said things on a stage in a foreign country. I mean, how are we? This is my point. This is why nobody's who's honest everyone sees through this, in my opinion, other than people that are invested in the lie.
Oh, it's Ramacia Ozturk. I mean, it's the same thing. She wrote an op-ed for her school freaking newspaper. I mean, and again, you have done more work than almost anybody I know talking about this, covering it from an honest perspective. There's tons of people on the Trumper side that are just screaming, yeah, get her. Not looking into the facts of what the case is at all, not looking into how dangerous this could possibly be and applied in multiple different ways, which again is what you guys talk about with the technocratic panopticon with regard to the entire Peter Thiel universe, CIA introduction to the quote unquote permanent deep state that is the technology end of the deep state that's been running for 20 years to position themselves to get in this spot. I remember the movie The Devil's Advocate. Al Pacino very famously says that it's the law that basically puts you into everything. But honestly, I've seen for my entire lifetime, it's been computers and technology that puts you into everything. Because every industry is looking to technologize and to improve efficiency, and they open up the doors. They open up they give you the keys, and you see everything when you're in IT. You hear the conversations they don't want you to hear. You see everything. So
that's the thing today, right? Before the internet, for example. You whether it's law or something else, like the point is that I think, as you're kind of pointing out, is that it evolves, right? And so today, you're right. I think today this is the new backdoor, or there's many, but a way to, through almost a logical presentation, right? Like let's just say from like a U.S. perspective to Americans, we have to beat China to get to AI, like whatever it is to get us to go, yeah, beat the bad guy, and then they rush out this AI, control system over us. Same with like the Patriot Act or any number of them, right? Like you're saying, a business who thinks, okay, well, I need to compete in the ecosystem, right? So that means I need to do what they're doing and bring in AI and bring in these software things and bring in the spyware, which then opens the door to NSO Group and Pegasus and Israeli spyware and, these different, and the whole country, which I've proven 50 times over, like a lot of people have that just care to look. This country is, I mean, think of it like, it's like chicken pox across the country of just Israeli spyware companies and Israeli overtaken Unit 8200. I mean, Whitney's talked about this in regard to, dams and infrastructure, electrical grid stuff. Like, this is not a joke. Like, they could quite literally decide to do this anytime they want. And that, I think, is one of the, kind of things they hold over this government right now. But it's very clear. I mean, and not just the overlap of Unit 8200 and Israeli intelligence into these companies, which is publicly stated more than once, but that these companies are already all over, speckled across this country and involved in everything that really matters. I mean, think about the pager attack in Lebanon. something they claim was there for 10 years. I think the evidence suggested 5, but nonetheless, pagers they released that circulated the population for years with explosives, and then detonating it, and then killing and maiming 75% of women and children. And that's like the most shockingly obvious terrorist attack I've ever seen. And what did he say in the interview with 60 Minutes? The world is a stage, right? That we're playing our role, and like they're making it clear that they see the world as their stage to act these things out. Gosh, just Zionism, not Israelis alone, not Jewish people alone, but Zionism, which infiltrates all sorts of religions in countries, is the real problem today. And Absolutely. It's very clear everywhere we look. And it's, the fact that people try to make that about racism is what has always allowed this to be, kind of hidden, and today it just lost its power. I don't really know what I think the act of genocide is kind of what shook people awake, but they've done this before, not to this level. So I don't know what the real kind of shift was other than that, but clearly people are not buying it anymore. And that allegation just does not work.
Well, it's the collective punishment, really. Honestly, they've done collective punishment before. The last time they really did it was in 2021, and that was the time that really radicalized me and woke me up. Again, I was raised as a conservative Jew, a Zionist, and I didn't even really understand the difference, again, because it's been conflated my entire life. This is what was sold to me and presented, and I never really asked hard. I wasn't very religious, and I just, whatever, you do what you do over there. That's your weird fucking, kind of religious nonsense. I don't believe in much of any of it, and their whole ritual and the reason behind it and why they say what they say, and the fact that Hebrew itself is a basically made-up language after 1948. Nobody taught any of this. Nobody taught us about the Nakba and how Israel was cleansed, quote unquote, in order to make it so that there was available land. They never told you about that. Or about how the terrorist attacks in all of the other Arab nations that were orchestrated by Zionists in order to make it so that the only safe place for Jews in the world is Israel. And I hear that narrative. I hear that narrative constantly. Right? It's totally inaccurate. Right. But what it is it's the only place in the world where they're allowed to create a second class of citizenry where they're not the second class. And that's the thing that I see, again steeped in racism. But
again, my perspective being from Zionists as opposed to Jews.
Yes,
right?
100%.
But to be clear, and it's actually, we should talk about this in a future conversation. Like, it's fascinating to have that. I've seen, this is my point. I've seen like a waterfall of people, even stars, by the way, who have historically been like adamantly pro-Israel, are starting to come out and say, I never even knew about this. I've totally changed my mind today. Like, I think it was, not that I can necessarily take it. It could just be opportunism, which I think is a big deal or a big part of it. I think it was either Seth Rogen or somebody like that you would expect.
Seth Rogen,
yeah. Like, is that what he said? Yeah. I was like, whoa, that's crazy. That just shows you that we are rapidly shifting in the conversation. But I just forgot the first part.
Yeah, their bubble, the bubble that we were put in has been, tremendous. And that is, again, where you see the power of media and the internet. And Absolutely. Especially, it's funny, that was one of the things that happened as a result of COVID was the YouTube kind of podcaster era started, where everybody realized, corporate media is shut down and sucks, and there's nothing new coming out anyway. So, and look, I started just sharing independent media because it was happening now. It was like Jimmy Dore, and I've evolved in what I've been watching and sharing and watching how they kind of carry themselves. And the 2024 election was a big bellwether. And, my friend, my brothers at INN and I were saying that you would see a big shift after the election in what people covered, in alliances potentially. And we're starting to see that play out, and that there are others that just don't know kind of where they stand at this point, and they're flailing. Do they cover the duopoly, even though they really can't stand the duopoly? But it's kind of audience capture, because they know that that's what their audience kind of likes to hear, is the drama back and forth between this one said this and this one said this. And they don't really give a shit because it doesn't impact their lives one way or another. And it's really just moving deck furniture around the deck of the Titanic while the ship is still going down and nobody's really doing anything about it. And let's get excited about this new this new guy that just showed up out of nowhere, who's basically written out of central casting to be the next iteration of exactly what everybody's been believing in for years that hasn't worked. Like, they're just dangling carrots in front of you, distractions, bread, circuses, throwing shit at, like, my big mission has been to try to get people, convince them to unplug from corporate media. All right? Give back your cable box. Like, or if it's part of your package, like right now I have to have a cable box, I get the basic channels, 2, 4, 7, 9, and 11, you know, like just the networks in my area, in the New York area. And I don't want to pay you for your box. That's a scam. They get $10 a month for the box and another $1 or $2 a month for the remote control to the box. They charge rent to this shit.
You got to go streaming. I mean, that's, you know, like the whole, that's why the prices have gone up dramatically, because the more people get away from the old cable model, they just raise the prices. You know, these days, you know, that's obviously there's just as many ways, or maybe, I don't know, just as many, but plenty of ways through streaming they can get the same propaganda in front of you. But at the very least, you're in control of what you want to, there's just a lot of different ways like that. But I think what's interesting is that they are clearly trying to keep this model going. Right. And so that's why we're seeing the beginning of the mainstream alternative media that really, like, that was another main part that kind of went part and parcel with the conversation of the pre-election discussion of Blackfield and so on. But the kind of this clear building out alternative, trying to recreate all these new. Yeah, like we're the new independent media, and half of them are people that 30 seconds ago, and they're only half a step out of the corporate media 30 seconds ago left. You know, that was another impetus for the IMA. You know, but
Tucker Carlson, really Piers Morgan. I mean, you know, and they're run by the corporate media. Talk TV is a fucking Rupert Murdoch channel. Like, just because it's not on cable doesn't mean that it's. And the other one, News Nation, is the one from Nexstar Media, the corporate media channel nobody asked for. That's what I call them. You know, they put Chris Cuomo together, and they put Bill O'Reilly together, and they have been Dan Savage and a couple of others. They throw that in with the Hill, and boom, 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 you got yourself another news channel that nobody. Again, they've recreated CNN but rebranded it. Now it's nice and blue instead of red. All right, and it changed colors, it changed the wrapping, but the script didn't change.
Yeah. I mean, that's what they're trying to create now, right? Is they're just trying to build this out into something that they can represent as really just what we're already doing. You know, like, it's really, think of it like circumventing. They're trying to co-opt what the independent media is. Like, it's funny, you think about the YouTube point. We all heard them for the longest time disparaging it. Oh, you're
denigrating. Oh, yeah.
Which is certainly some of them, right? And which, by the way, is funny that most of the people, I remember when Mark Dice, not to say that, one good or bad, but I remember he used to be, get millions of views, and he would make the joke, I'm just on my laptop, my kitchen counter, and he's right. There's a whole new thing, and they just couldn't wrap their minds around it. And that they really were trying to, disparage us. Oh, you guys are silly. But meanwhile, they were really trying to build their market on YouTube without really us seeing that. And then eventually just shifted into it. And then there's a funny overlap of the COVID-19 time frame where you saw all these people who are, they're the blow-dried idiots in the ivory tower. Like they don't even, like, they're sitting down and getting told what to say, and all of a sudden now they have to work their computer. All of a sudden they're on Zoom, and all these times we caught them with their microphone off or doing something in the background, or like confused about how to work the computers. It just shows you these people are just, they're not the real thing. None of these corporate media people, or like the point of like Don Lemon, for example, who really just wanted to be an entertainment news guy, and they just shoved him into media. And now he's this big journal. He's not, though, right? They're all fake, and I think that's what we're all doing. What you're trying to do is we're trying to build something that is legitimate, that doesn't need to be like, that you can see for yourself, that it's objective, it's nonpartisan, there's facts presented. You don't need to trust anybody. Nobody's asking you to trust anybody. Here are the facts, right? Here's what I think about them, and you can look at it for yourself. It's just like, it's wild how easy it is to see the difference between those things. But some people out there really just want entertainment, and that's okay, right? But the conflation of entertainment and news is like the biggest thing today, right? And that's the hard part.
Infotainment, man. And that's, so that's one of the things that we've tried to do is, how do you try to inform but entertain at the same time? I think Jesse Jett does a really good job through his music. And again, you also have found music as an outlet to connect with people and get them into hearing the message, because hearing it musically and repeating it through music, I think, is really important. Even just doing dumb react stuff, Sunday nights after we do the news, my buddy Reef and I will just watch dumb stuff. He curates silly cat videos and weed videos, and just to kind of cut loose and show your personality that it's not just about following the horrible news, and that we have more to us than that. We'll watch, MMA on Saturday nights. Now, we don't stream that. I'm like, dude, we should stream this. It's like, dude, some stuff we have to not stream. It feels like sometimes, and you probably get into this quite a bit too, like you're online and you're on camera a bunch, and you're like, well, why aren't we recording this type of thing? This would be a great conversation for a podcast. Right. How often do we have that kind of conversation? And then another one's like, nah, you know what, maybe it shouldn't be totally out there for everyone. Again, finding that balance. How many shows a week do you do? How many hours a week do you put into this? You said you put a lot of time in. Is there family balance? How do you, I know you spend time away, you kind of try to unplug from all devices and disconnect. How do you do that? Like, and I have such a hard time. I got to tell you, I can't put my phone down with Twitter and everything lately.
You just got to just do it, and trust me, I get stuck. Like I keep my phone in this, it's a blackout pouch. It's not in there now. I just have it here in case, while I'm live, I look at it, but I put it in this pouch anytime I'm not working. Right. And I take it out if I want to use it. So if I need to call somebody, if I want to do something, and so but it confounds people that just act like you're somehow insulting them by not being on your phone. And I think it's so wild. Like on a weird connective side note, for example, at home, if somebody comes up and rings my doorbell, and I don't care if they can see me through the window, and I don't want to deal with it, and I don't know them, I don't care. I'm not going to get up, leave a message. Like, the point is, like, people think you have to get up and address what's going on at the door. Like, I don't want someone here. If I didn't call somebody here, I'm expecting somebody, then I can deal with it later. I don't want to. They're most likely going to be like a telemarketer or whatever. But it's the same kind of point, is that we have to set the boundaries for when we want to be engaged, not that that the thing dings and we're pulled into it like a barking seal. Like that's how this is supposed to. They want that kind of connection. So it's about building that that's the right word for it. Resilience, but more so like, just the resistance to it, I think is important. But so I put it in there when I'm not working, and I do miss things, obviously, like in that sense. That's why I rely on the community to, see things they think are important, and they either tag me on Twitter or they send me a direct message. And what I do when I get ready is I sit down and the first thing I do is go through what they might have sent me. And then what I do is I'll see things and I send it to myself. So I don't have to research. I just see something's interesting. I send it to myself. I put it away. And so then I sit down and I go through all the things I sent to myself. I open up all of that stuff and I organize it in how I think it fits together. And then I look to my other things, my previous investigations, what I had from yesterday, and I organize it. Now, to your point about time, when I work, I'll be in here from 7, 8 in the morning until 10, sometimes 10 p.m., depending on how long it gets started. Like, it's a long day. And that's why and the shows can be, and more seem like today lately, because of the other things pulling me away, the shows end up being like 4+ hours. And I don't always want that, but I do think it's, it's long form, deep investigatory conversation, and I just put myself into it. But then I, let's say, decide to take the next day off, I put the phone away. I try to break away from it. I try to look at it as much as I can. And I go outside, go out with my dog. And I love my garden, which by the way, I'm going to be putting up another update. I recently shared it just because I think it's cool. Like, this is the first time for me with having the land we have now, just being able to really, and it's nothing crazy yet, but really start to do something for real. And I've got and that's not a count, 18 different things going now. I'm just planting, and they're all getting huge, and lots of tomatoes. And so but I love it because you can go out there and you can, ground a little bit, take your feet off, stand in the earth, be outside, absorb the sun, and just enjoy the day. And that's that, or hiking, or playing music, or just, hanging out with my family is pretty much the majority of what I do these days, because it's hard to commit to things these days with, knowing, like, a hard thing for me. And this is so hard because for me, and I know that I make this choice, which I know will rub people the wrong way in some circles or some cases, but this for me is more important than anything. Maybe save for my immediate family, or for sure, save for immediate family. And I will put this before just about anything. And so my point is, I might have plans. Might be, set up to do something. My friends that I have in this area, they're aware of that. I might decide, well, man, this, Israel just bombed Iran, for example, or something. And I'm like, well, that's going to take precedent. Cancel the plans. I jump in, I start working. But there's times when I don't see those things because I'm not paying attention. My point, though, is that when you make that the reality, with this will take precedent over anything, it changes your life. And it has, for people that know me from when I grew up, they see like they'll in person, I'm the same person, but like they see the show and they, I'm still outside of this, but growing up, very jovial person, quick to laugh, just kind of, being, and I think that has changed me quite a bit because it's, I've always been a skeptic, but I think seeing this stuff firsthand and so day to day, just like once again, for the 50th time, proving to myself, these people are as dark and bad and evil as we think they might be. These things, they change who you are and change how you view the world. But it also makes me more adamant to fight for the good that we have in the world.
Yeah, and I'm right there with you on seriously, it's so difficult to balance mental health by seeing the atrocities daily, by knowing that literally every conversation that somebody brings up to me about a corporation, all right, about a politician, about something that's happening in the news, I basically have a perspective because I spend all day doing this, that I've researched that and I can tell you 3 reasons why that's bullshit, or why you believe that because this person said this on this channel and then it got disseminated by these people, and because it serves this narrative, all right, you're only hearing half the story and here's the rest of it. And it makes people crazy. It makes me crazy to know that there's so many people being misinformed intentionally, and they're not curious enough to either go look for it. They don't want to hear the opposite side of it that would inform them further in a lot of cases. And it's frustrating for me as somebody who tries to get to the bottom of it. And then the other thing that I hear a lot of is, well, you can't really change anything anyway. I literally had a good friend, someone who I've known for 25 years. It's might be the last time I see him. We'll see. But it's like, you spend all this time doing this and it's so negative. And even if 20,000 people change their minds because of what you said, does that really change anything in the world?
Wow. That's about the most black pill thing I've ever heard, right? That's what black pill looks like, right? You're giving
absolutely. If I could change 20,000 people, fuck.
Well, my thing I've been saying since I've ever started this, if I do this, I sit down, I put 15 hours to it, and I change one person's mind that day, that's a success. That, who knows and who can quantify what that one person who they talk to, what they can do, what their children will do, and obviously it's more than one person. The point is that's how do we measure the effect that will be? And I mean, how is it not a success to be able to, and I shouldn't say, that's to inform them with the correct thing, or, give them the opportunity to see the way I view this and have them consider my perspective. Not that I'm trying to convince people to see it the way I see it. It's like the reality is showing them the full picture and and then coming to that conclusion. Like that is a powerful thing, and it's so sad to me that people can have that kind of defeatist mentality that, what really did, and even he can't even say 20,000 people. My God, that can change a lot of things, right? If you actually could, if you right today, this show influenced 20,000 people to see this problem, that very well could be a watershed moment. That's a lot of people, but either way, I think that's sad because really, what we're trying to do is just inform people and get the information out there. And yeah, it could be negative because there's a lot of negative things. There's a lot of people doing really dark and evil things in the world. And hopefully people can see beyond that. They can see the truth in it all, but fight for something better. A lot of people see what we do and think it's all just, you're just, you're depressing me. It's all sad. But the thing is, the only way, like the classic saying is that, the step to solving a problem is acknowledging you have one. If we're not even at the point where we can acknowledge that what they're doing is wrong and bad, and we're just trying to look for flowers and rainbows, and Elon Musk is saying, don't be so negative online. Like they're trying to suppress our conversation of how bad and evil this all is. And if we don't point to it, if we don't talk about it, how are we going to stop it from being a thing? How do we get past it? How do we stop our governments from committing more genocides? If you put your head in the sand and act like you don't want to look at it, then you're allowing that complicity. What's that actual state? There's a saying about that. I can't remember now, that basically being complicit, like silence is complicity, essentially is the point. That makes me sad though. I'm sorry to hear that about your friend.
Yeah. And again, it's coming from people that are comfortable, that are successful, that don't really want the system to change because they've done well in it. And they acknowledge that it hasn't really been fair or that it's available to everyone, but they got theirs, so everybody else should figure it out too. And I see this from Tesla drivers a lot. It's really interesting because of the mental gymnastics they've had to do with Elon the last 3-4 years. Okay, from him being a Democratic Party darling, right, to now being like this corrupt funder of our elections that in some ways feels like he bought Trump's victory. I disagree. I think Trump was gonna win regardless of Elon's money, because Miriam Adelson was gonna fund that shit, and that was gonna be all Trump ever needed in the first place. Plus, you have the crypto industry, which I think is also something that admirable that you've not, but while you've also called out in being incredibly corrupt. All right. In the way they've been doing these rug pulls with meme coins. And so few people are talking about that other than to laugh about it, which is weird. All right. These are everyday Americans getting scammed because they trust and believe in the media figures and that are telling them that this is legitimate. People like a Jake Paul, for example, or Trump. And so they buy this thing expecting it to go to the moon. Meanwhile, they've already pulled all of the profitability out of this thing and leaving all of their supporters to hold the bag. This happens on a daily basis.
There's numerous ones too, but Trump's team alone, right? They had World Liberty Financial is like the main thing they're still doing, but they had Trump coin. And there were connections that I talked about this on the show, and both of them that I can see, all of them that I can see that they put out have. I mean, most of them were like the telltale, meme or the pump and dump, where it was like within the first few days down to nothing. But some of them, slowly went down, but it's the same result, and slowly meaning like a month maybe, but just down to like maybe 10% of what it originally was worth. People put a lot of money into this, and there's a lot of people out there that were very hardcore Trump supporters that believed what he said and now are, pretty grizzled about it. Like that's like, because they lost tens of thousands of dollars. It's hard to support a man when you lose your life savings because you believe that he's not going to, it's now obviously you could argue that he couldn't predict or know that it would go that way. But if you look at the way that they did those things, it's very obvious this was going to be the way it worked out, right? That I mean, there's few things besides the origin, like, there's a few things in this field in general that tend to really go up, and it's about more so getting a lot of influence and focus on it, or so ones that are more technologically, fitting into the new field. But yeah, I think they knowingly played their audience. I genuinely think that they sucked money out of anybody they could. That's the thing, that you can look at what Trump or Biden or Bush or Obama are doing, and you can literally see, if you care to look for yourself and really investigate, that they don't actually care about the people they claim to care about. Because in every moment, the U.S. government as a whole will sacrifice anything to achieve its immediate goal. History shows us that, if we're honest about it.
Yeah. The only thing is that I will say that Trump has done it to a personal level, both to his supporters and to personally enrich himself more than any other one I've seen nakedly. Look, Obama came in poor and left rich. Obama came in poor, left rich. Yep. It is a different time.
All right, go ahead.
But that he can, again, launch a meme coin the day before he takes office, pump up his net worth to $60 billion at one point, have the whole thing come down, and he's worth about $10 billion at the end of it. Then there is the ownership in Trump Media and Technology Group and how he owns half of Truth Social. All right. Again, now starting to become a Bitcoin holding company, because that's the new Wall Street darling thing. First, it was have a social media company, bring in all of your supporters, be able to, again, through the Rumble ecosystem. And it's interesting. I had a back and forth with Chris Pavlovsky. He came into my DMs. He was a little worried about a thing with Peter Thiel, a conversation. And then I was like, he also wanted to know, as a heavy user, tell me about some of the things that you would like to see at Rumble. And he insists that he is no longer connected at all to Peter Thiel. He was an early founder. He bought his way out and he's done. But that's not how this works. Peter Thiel may be out, but Peter Thiel put J.D. Vance and Vivek Ramaswamy and other underlings who he can pass messages through very easily and not be directly connected. And Chris is going to listen if JD says, hey, Peter told me XYZ, and this is where he wants it to go, and they want access to that. You think Chris isn't going to listen to that?
Or if Peter reaches out to him personally, you think he's going to ignore Peter Thiel? Yeah, hardly. But here's what's funny. I just asked Grok to see. This is one of the few ways that I will use this on the show, as I always point out. Don't trust Grok or Brave or any other AI. They could all be manipulated. But it's important, I think, to use it as a counterbalance to people that may think Grok is, more of a right-leaning thing. It's interesting. So it's coming from that conversation. Here's what it says. Peter Thiel is still connected to Rumble through his investment in Naria Capital, which he co-founded, and his personal investment in the company. Those are two different things. In May 20, and then it goes on to describe that. So that's really telling to me that he's trying to tell everybody that's not the case. Let that speak for itself.
Aren't there Class B shares that didn't go to the public market that like the founders and, they didn't put the entire company public 100% of it. They only put a percentage of shares on the market to begin with. Chris is still also the largest shareholder. I
don't know. It's hard. Like with Twitter, for example, it's really difficult. Twitter's a different animal in the way that they're shielding some, information, but it's like, you don't really know, in my opinion. There's
so many ways they can. Yep.
Well, that too. But I mean, like with Rumble or any private company, like there's ways that you can make sure your face or your name is not connected with, using shell companies or any number of things, right? So it's really hard to know for sure. My point, and the point you made, I think is more important, is that, clearly, and my point with this, I already knew that information, whether Grok says it or not, you can look these things up. The point is that the influence is what matters, right? And it's obvious to see that these people have a very clear slant. Rumble has been very clearly a conservative-leaning platform and even has examples of censorship that we've talked about. No, not as much as we've seen before, but let's not forget, it is BlackRock and Vanguard are two of the leading shareholders, and it's all the same problems, all the same conversations, and really the same choke points as Twitter, as YouTube had. It's all the same thing. It's all the same stuff. So why would these advertisers suddenly not care over here, but we're told that they care over on YouTube side? It doesn't make any sense. So I think we're being shuffled into this for obvious reasons. I hope I'm wrong, but it just speaks volumes or back to my point, is that the influence. So Thiel and other people, or even the politicians or the people you just mentioned, that they have this person's ear. And so if they reached out and they wanted to make a statement, or they wanted to control content, I'd like to believe that wouldn't happen, but we should at least ask whether that's influence is there, so it's not like I'm going to censor content because Trump says so, but what if there's a way that we can, promote certain videos, make sure these ones are always on the front page versus the others? That happens all the time. I think that's important to think about.
Yeah. And I've always seen Rumble, unfortunately, and I've been a heavy user and trying to take advantage of everything that they've made available to a streamer, mostly so I can help other streamers and be able to speak intelligently to what their tools are and be able to figure, look, they've lost $10 million a month as a company since they started. They've never really tried to get profitable yet. And Amazon did that for a long time too. Figure out, get the users, then figure out how to monetize. Okay. But I saw it always as an influence mining op and as a dissident, whoever, where do the dissidents that get kicked off of YouTube go, and how do you gather that sentiment, be able to understand what it is, and then build counter programming to it? I think that's what Rumble was created for. Okay. There was Rockfin, there's Odyssey, but the big corporations didn't have their fingers in that. Number one. I also think that after January 6th, the Trump ecosystem decided that they were never going to allow Amazon to shut down a platform of theirs again. So they decided to start building their own with Rumble Cloud hosting. So now they power Truth Social. Go ahead.
No, last time I checked, so I think I heard about this. I haven't been following up on, the inner work. So Rumble, last time I checked, it was a while ago, they were still using Amazon Cloud services. So they've shifted over to their own.
Oh, yeah. I'm not sure. They were using Amazon just for the ad network at one point, and for how they serve the ads. They may even still be doing that, but everything else is hosted on their own servers now. When they were doing the Republican convention, they had a DDoS attack where the whole thing kind of went down on them at one point, and that didn't happen to the rest of them. But sometimes when the rest of the web gets a DDoS attack, nothing happens to Rumble servers, and that's because they've moved it to a completely different set of hardware that they own and control. But that ownership and control also means that you've got the CIA's hand directly in that. They can claim to be free speech, and that's the hook. That's how they get all the people that say the stuff that nobody else wants them to say. Now you can mine who that is and potentially target them, look at what else, and then back your way into who are they connected to, who do they speak with, what do they follow, and you could go into Unit 8200, where's daddy type of shit with them legitimately, and That scares the crap out of me. And people aren't putting this all together.
I'm gonna do some background on that when I get some time around what their services are, where that connects to, because I'm super interested in how that connects. Because one of the things that I can't stop seeing in all this, which actually connects with what you were just saying about the technology side of it, about the Palantir AI being used to murder people in Gaza, for example, with Lavender, and which, by the way, despite the pushback, has been more than once now shown to be their technology being used, and even in Ukraine, Anduril supplying the drones, Palantir supplying the technology. They are weapons of war today, or at least involved with mass warfare. And so seeing that Thiel is connected to Rumble and wondering whether there is some kind of backdoor channel. Not to say that I'm even knowing that, just as a thought to research, because it is everywhere. And I'm not talking my assumption. Like, if you dig in and look, like even with Trump's this administration, open the door to the NSO group, Pegasus, like these are spyware companies through Israel. Or we talked about in the beginning, the conversation of all the different companies that have been allowed through multiple administrations. So you wonder, or, I mean, to make it obvious, like the bigger point about the not siloing the personal data from IRS and Social Security and allowing Palantir and all these things that are literally in a strategic partnership right now with Israel as they commit genocide to use their tech to scoop through all of our American data. I'm on a side note, I am convinced that this is, not only has this country been overtaken by Zionist influence, but that ultimately in backdoor access to a lot of stuff in this country through Doge, through Palantir, through a lot of examples that are being rolled out right in front of us. My point was that I'm interested to see what that new system is and whether it's connected to something that might matter. I'll look into that.
And it opens everybody up to be blackmailed, because everybody has skeletons. Everybody has things that they want to keep private. And the amount of visibility that they get into all of these systems allows them to Whitney wrote about it last summer with her JD Vance article that I spent an hour reading on my show. It's amazing. Then you got to talk to her about it for 2 hours. She wrote an hour-long article, talked about it for 2+. But total information awareness, the Poindexter stuff, going back to the early 2000s, spinning off LifeLog, which became Facebook, all right? Getting Thiel involved in the middle of those two entities, Palantir and LifeLog and Facebook, all right? Screams that they've been trying to put together this, and my buddy calls it the Morgan Freeman in Batman kind of thing, where they can literally map everybody, but not just map your location, map your brain and physical thoughts and where you're going to go so that they can pre-crime you. That's where Whitney's gone.
That's the stuff of my nightmares right there. Like when you really step into that next level, the neuroweapon, neuroscience, nanotech, like that's the, and again, I based on the evidence that I can see, I'm pretty convinced that this stuff has been in use for a long time. And it's not, it's not hyperbolic. It's not based on frivolous information. It's just so far beyond what many people want to even consider being possible that most people just don't even want to look at it. And I get it. It's terrifying. How do you fight something like that? But my God, man. Yeah. Like you overlap even without that stuff, like you're highlighting first, you open this door to this like with AI, for example, which they're all still pushing forward, and allow that kind of information flow, whether we're talking about like a Skynet direction or just the fact that you have human beings that can access this level of comprehensive information and use that to just map what we are. It's like that. This is technocracy dystopian stuff, guys. It's like literally right in front of us. And a lot of us have been warning about this for a long time. I mean, I'm new in that group, to be honest. There's people that have been doing this for 10 years before me that have been like Patrick Wood or plenty of others that are talking about this is coming, David Icke. And it's like, it's right in front of us. And the people that have been the ones trying to highlight themselves as pushing back against the problem, the deep state, are all the ones suddenly cheering it on, and it's like what you're just saying. It's like, this is how these things are cultivated over time, and now we're watching them put the pieces in place, and it's up to people like us to stand up and try to warn people, to make them aware. I think, frankly, we're winning in that field, to be honest. People see it.
Well, look, the famous thing at the Army Navy game where you had, was it Thiel and JD Vance and Trump standing next to on camera with a big Palantir billboard. They're at Army Navy game at the state. Like they were they tell you the symbology all the time. And that's where I think you look into a lot of, they give the game away because they're so giddy about achieving their goals, and that they realize how close they are to getting to it, that they start to give these little tells. and you can see where their thought process is going and where they want to go. Like, we can see clearly Club of Rome, where they want to go in reshaping the Middle East and the rest of the world. They want to put these 10 fiefdoms, kingdoms into place. And this has been orchestrated since the 1960s. And they're on a super long timeline. They've got Russia on board. They've got China on board. They've got Europe on board. They've just really kind of got to get the people a little bit on board. But they look at how they've brainwashed people into Greenland shit, for example, into North American Union with Canada, the 51st state. That to me
this is one of the point I was just making.
Wow.
Look at someone like Alex Jones, who's been positioning himself for years as the one fighting the NWO and then it literally, for the most, like in physical, like you're saying, you start literally saying, here's the mass we want to create. It's like right out of Technocracy Inc. And they start pointing in other directions, you know, talking about how Palantir is a small thing and lefties don't like it. It's like, what is happening, man? And back to the Palantir point, remember at that same game is when they aired that commercial about the drones and all the different drone stuff. And then all of a sudden we had spun out into this massive drone distraction discussion, even though there's very real things to discuss around like the fog. Remember that took over for a minute? There are real things to consider in these conversations, but the fact that it was like a test to see if they could just be like this thing and it just overtook the entire conversation for 2 days, it happened, you know?
It became the Iranian mothership off the East Coast. Remember? It was an Iranian drone mothership that China sold them off the East Coast, right? That they were sending automobile-sized drones off the Jersey Shore. People were seeing shit in the air. I was like, this is a military exercise. It has to be. Because there's no way anybody else is...
My point...
Yeah. I didn't think there was any way anyone was getting into our airspace like that past the military without our knowing so. There's just no way.
Seriously. Exactly. But, you know, on top of that, it was that and then the massive, like, propagandized mainstream alternative media just, like, vomiting lies over the entire conversation, like using old videos like happens every time from years ago, saying, I saw this and they saw that, or, you know, just, or you know, anything like this. Like the fog was another one where there's real things to consider about contamination in the air or nanotech or whatever. But 9 times out of 10, those videos are people that just weren't smart enough to know that if you shine a flashlight in fog, you're gonna see particles. And it's like, oh my God, I can see all these particles. And so all these people just took advantage and started screaming on top of it, you know, and it's lies. People are deceiving you, whether they know they're doing it for a reason or not, or they just want to get clicks and shares. You know, there's a coordinated thing that happens around this, you know, and the drone part on top of that is, like you were saying, that part, but also the fact that you had the carryover into the Iran part, remember, like you said, but also that they were sniffing for things that Iran might have planted in the United States. They were bomb sniffing drones, and Jones had people on the show that said, we know for sure that this is coming tomorrow, and then none of it happened.
Picatinny Arsenal. Absolute. I'm only 45 minutes from Picatinny Arsenal, and they were worried that there was nukes there, that they were going to drop a nuke or they were going to do something over there. Like, and it's helping people kind of decipher and look critically at some of these things and go, wait a minute. And I think you do a really good job. Question everything. It's on your laptop all the time, that big sticker. All right. Which is, does that make sense? Because a lot of the shit they say just doesn't make sense. And they're trying to push it past you, hoping you don't really notice. And they move on to the next news cycle because the news dump is so powerful today. There's so much information overload that I think a lot of these, you know, podcasters, they never expect anybody to go back and look at their record and call them out on it. And even if they do, it's a thing that'll blow over in 2 days. And they don't really necessarily care about what they lose integrity-wise in the meantime. I think you do. I think we do. There are people that mean that their reputation means something over time, and they don't want to lose people because they were inaccurate or because they misinformed intentionally and then didn't correct the record. You do that.
Yeah. That's the thing, is they don't have integrity, right? That's what that demonstrates, right? Is they don't have the principles or integrity to, you know, they'd rather just hope nobody catches them. So that's dishonesty, right? And so it's like you're saying that I think people like us will come around and say, you know, whether or not anybody even pointed it out, you know, like I noticed that this turns out to be incorrect, or I noticed that, like, for even just in yesterday's show, I think I was going through all my reports about the the different deportation points and the visas and U.S. citizenship, because there's a lot of points about U.S. citizens that were being potentially deported, who are, the naturalized point, as well as like Bob Villan, who had a visa, who got it revoked. And I just accidentally said, I think, U.S. citizenship. My point is, well down in the show, I circled back and was like, oh, you know what? I made a mistake and called it out. And most people don't even notice that,
Right.
it's because it matters to me that my record, that I called it out because I made a mistake, or that people don't get misinformed because I was too worried to be called out, or weeks later, as we've seen, you come back to a story and you go, okay. And, and to be real, that there's very few times that happens on this show, because I don't make grandiose claims that I can't back up with facts. And if I do, I'm talking about my theories around things. And so the few times it's happened, I have, then this is what the facts are, and something changes. And I go, okay, well, that changes it. And as soon as I can, I come back and say, here's what changed. And one thing I'll always add in any conversation is when we're looking at things with limited information, right? This is the first day of a breaking story. Well, what do you look? You look at the facts and you say, here's what the facts show right now. But let's not forget, tomorrow, there could be a new thing that comes on the scene that changes the whole perspective. And we go, okay, that's why it makes sense. And that could be a lie too. You consider that, but always think about that. And then we'll still be circling back and saying that we had this wrong, but understand that there's new information that comes around that changes these stories. It's just like you're saying, it's just about being honest. It's about having enough integrity to acknowledge those things, because the real goal that we have is to just inform people, not to gain from it,
And I think you brought up an important point, which I want to start next time, because I know you've got a hard stop and I really appreciate your time, but it's about being a reactionary versus bringing your stuff, researching, and having a plan on how you want to present material. Because I think there's a lot of channels in our space that have thrived on becoming a reactionary. Something happened, let's go live and talk about it. They don't know anything yet. But they just want to talk about it because they know people are there and want to see you talk about it. But you don't have any information to really bring other than what you knew already, what everybody already kind of knows. To me, I don't want to do that. I want to bring new information and present it in a way that you don't have. Look, independent media means that we don't have to be first. We don't have to be reactionary, but we can step back and get it right and actually tell you what we think. And I don't think there's enough people doing that. I think they're too busy to rush to the click and to the super chat.
I greatly respect that too. I agree with you. Like, from my perspective, it's the same way, right? And I don't want to be like, I won't, if I rush to the story, it's because I think I have something important that adds to it at that moment. But nonetheless, though, I would still argue that there's a space for that, right? There are people that, like, let's say, take myself, for example, if something immediately happened and I just happened to be live, which has happened before, I feel like I have enough background about what the people are, what they've done before, what I expect might have happened, what we've already been discussing, to give some perspective on, even if it's reactionary in that moment. But I do really agree with you. I think it behooves us to make sure that it's not just jumping on to, like, I think your point is a lot of them jump on and just repeat narratives, as opposed to having a, debate or nuanced conversation about it. But I think, really, I agree with you. I think what we should be doing is, waiting to make sure we can have facts on the story so we can inform people, as opposed to just reacting to the story they put in front of us, because the way propaganda works today is about reactions, about emotion. They want you to react in a way that's not logical, And so that's why I appreciate your work, brother. And I really do thank you for having me on. And I'm looking forward to talking again so we can have, more time to talk about stuff.
Yeah, definitely. And everyone, thank you for watching, for listening. Really quickly, if you're able to, and of means, we are user-funded. We are value for value system, as Steve Poikonen famously says. This is our wall of fame. These are the amazing people that do support our network. I appreciate that. Ways to do that. We don't like to do it through the platforms. Cash App, $, Indie News Network, ko-fi.com/Indie News Network, paypal.me/Indie News Network, at our self-hosted website. I didn't even get to talk to Ryan about IndieNewsNow.com. We'll do that next week. And INN Newsletter and IndieMediaToday.com over at Substack, because I did certainly want to talk to you about distribution, hosting, censorship. God, I got so many places I want to go with you. But I really thank you. You're so generous with your time. This has been an amazing INN one-on-one with Ryan Cristián from TLAV. We will be back soon to do it again. And stay informed, everyone. Support independent media, because we need it more than ever. I love you all. Have a good night, everyone.
I guess this isn't such an awful place. Is that what you want me to say? You prove it's possible to sleep for days, and I still think you're right here awake. The cost of living isn't much to me, but God, it's so hard to say. And when they told you everything was safe, were you safe? Were you safe? Were you safe?
Fresh off the masses, the brand new cancerous growth, who has come here to fight.
Who are these people?